Good morning. Welcome everyone to our study this morning. We're continuing in our study in the book of Judges. We are in Judges chapter 9 and the first 5 verses of chapter 10 this morning. Pretty much in the middle of the book, although it's about 2/3 of the way of our period of the Judges between the conquest of the land of Canaan and the United Kingdom. So that's it's kind of historically, we're past the halfway point, but we're at the midpoint, I think, in the book. And much about what we've been studying has been illustrated that we've got to this particular point. This may be this is not to be a complete spoiler, but this is not the lowest point in Israel's history, but it's approaching there, and we got here kind of on purpose for the reasons that were outlined in the early portions of the book. But before we get into the study proper, let's start with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for all the ways that you're mindful of us, but we're especially thankful for this opportunity that we have to assemble here and to study your word together. We pray, Father, that we will use this time fruitfully, that we will share our thoughts together, we will share our observations and meditations from what you revealed to us in the word, so that we can encourage each other to be better servants of you. We can learn more about you. We can learn how to better be your people and to shine as lights and be the example that you intend us to be. We're aware that many of our number are traveling. We also have many guests that are visiting with us, and we ask that your blessings upon them and that they would soon be able to return and be with us again if it would be your will. Father, forgive us of our sins. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. This is an ancient site. This site that Shechem goes back to even in Genesis, and the history of the people of this city and Jacob's family is one that's fairly colorful. And I won't go into all of that, but that's worth a read. But this city was there before Abraham, very likely. It's an ancient site, and it's in the occasion here. The city of Shechem is in this valley, centered between Mount Gerizim to the south and Mount Ebal to the north. And it was a point at which Moses gave instruction to the children of Israel about when they crossed the Jordan and went into the land. And it's a natural break in this mountain pass going east-west. So it's on a highway. So it's these naturally occurring breaks that you didn't have to beat mountains out of the way to be able to make roads are particularly attractive to the ancient world. And so we want to set the Wayback Machine to 400 years or so before this, pretty close. And I want to make a reading, a little bit of a lengthy reading from, by way of introduction, from Deuteronomy, the 11th chapter, beginning in verse 8. You shall therefore keep every commandment which I am commanding you today, that you may go strong and go in and possess the land which you are about to cross to possess it, so that you may prolong your days on the land which the Lord swore to your fathers to give to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land which you are entering to possess it is not like the land of Egypt which you came, where you used to have to sow your seed and water it with your foot like a vegetable garden. But the land in which you are about to cross to possess it, a land of hills and valleys, drinks water from the rain of heaven, a land for which the Lord your God cares. The eyes of the Lord your God are always on it, from the beginning even to the end of the year. And it shall come about, if you listen obediently to my commandments, which I am commanding you today, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul, that he will give the rain to your land in its season, in the early and the late rain, that you may gather in your grain and your new wine and your oil. And he will give grass in your fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. Beware that your hearts are not deceived, and that you do not turn away and serve other gods and worship them, or the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you. And he will shut up the heavens so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its fruit, and you will perish quickly from the good land which the Lord is giving you. You should therefore impress these words of mine on your heart and on your soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall teach them to your sons, talking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk in the road, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, and so that your days and the days of your sons may be multiplied on the earth, which the Lord swore to your fathers to give to them. as long as the heavens remain above the earth. For if you are careful to keep all this commandment, which I am commanding you to do, to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to hold fast to him, then the Lord will drive out these nations before you, and you will dispossess nations greater and mightier than you. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads shall be yours. Your border will be from the wilderness to Lebanon, and from the river Euphrates, as far as the western sea. No man will be able to stand before you. The Lord your God will lay the dread of you and the fear of you on all the land in which you set foot, as he has spoken to you. See, I'm setting before you this day a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, which I'm commending you today, and the curse, if you do not listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside from the way that I'm commanding you today, by following other gods which you have not known. It shall come about when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to possess it, that you shall place the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Are they not across the Jordan, west of the way and toward the sunset, and the land of the Canaanites who live in the Arabah, opposite Gilgal, beside the oaks of Moreh? For you are about to cross the Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall possess it and live in it. And you should be careful to do all the statutes and judgments which I'm setting before you today. I thought that's an interesting bookend to our lesson, because it's centered on that. If you actually go back to page 30, in which we were looking at some of the other battles and such that Gideon engaged in and such, if you look on the left side of the page, about halfway up and down, you'll find Mount Gerizim and Mount Gebal called out, and Shechem and centered in there. So you can see that that's at least where part of the action is for today's lesson. We also are confronted, I think, with this is the aftermath of things being at peace. After Gideon and his army, or God using Gideon and his army, and the help of the tribes of Israel that came when called to assist, to drive out the Midianites and the Amalekites and the sons of the east. The country enjoyed peace. They attempted in chapter 8 to make Gideon king, or to leader. They didn't use the word king, but they said, "We want you to lead us, you and your sons." And so the idea was that he would establish a dynasty. That they liked the way that he conducted himself, and they liked their state of things, having driven off this marauding army that had displaced them from their fields and their livestock and their produce. And they wanted to continue in doing that, and so they proposed to Gideon that he'd continue in his lead with this. But his answer to them was no. Neither me nor my sons will lead you in this fashion. We have a king. We don't need a king. Our king is the Lord. He did do some king-like things, though, including having numerous wives and concubines, and had a very large family, 70 sons in all. And at some point then, after I think Gideon passed, because it mentioned that the people of the land did not honor Gideon. They did not honor Gideon nor his sons for the effort Gideon made. And so sometime after this period of peace, I think we have the stage set for Amalek's conspiracy. Or rather, not Amalek, Abimelech. Abimelech, the name, as we noted last week, means "my father is a king." That's one translation of it. It was also a title of some of the Canaanite kings, and we will find even later on that David reuses his name. Again, that may have been wishful thinking. It may have been named by his mother, who was not, well, although Shechem is quite literally in the middle of the land of Israel at this point, kingdom of Israel, not kingdom, but the land of Israel at this point. It's an ancient city. And in fact, because of the attitudes of the people that are living in it and such, those Canaanite roots may have run very deep. And so the Canaanite influence may still be strong there. As a matter of fact, this city has towers, has places of worship where there are treasuries and towers to idols. And so it's not following God's plan. I thought the reading was interesting, not only geographically, refamiliarizing ourselves with the importance, or at least where we've heard these names before, but also the terms and conditions. If the people had followed God's instructions and were continuing to follow God's instructions, the descendants of Jacob would still be owning this parcel of land. I think even to today, the terms that God gave them was, even though he used as long as there are the heavens, this land is yours. He used terms like that in the passage we just read, but it was conditional on them remaining his people. Because if they chose not to, if they didn't choose to remain his people, then they would just become another idolatrous people that he would have to deal with. And they would forfeit this great right, this promise that he didn't make to them specifically because they were so great, but he made to because of their forefathers, particularly Abraham. And so that's the stage that we have here, and that's how this is an example of how far these people have drifted at this point when we begin to see this begin to unfold. What was the state of things in terms of the rule of the land? What's the problem that Abimelech developed a solution for? Or was there a problem? And of course there was. I've already introduced that. Well, what was the problem that Abimelech decided to try to solve? Too many leaders. Whether he just asked, which would you rather have? Would you rather have kind of a rotation of these 70 men, which, 70 is prolific. Even with a lot of wives, 70 is a lot of sons, and that's not counting the daughters, right? So this is a big family. And basically the rule of this family, even though Gideon told them that my sons would not rule over you, there were some that just couldn't shed that idea. And Abimelech, being one of those sons, being at least a half brother to the other sons of Gideon, proposed basically, would you rather have a pool of 70 or in some succession of 70, or what's the alternative that he offers them? What's so great about Abimelech, aside from he's Abimelech? But why would the men of Shechem have any affection for or allegiance to Abimelech? He's their family. His mother's from the city. Matter of fact, he may have grown up in the city. He may have enjoyed this distanced relationship with the other brother, with his brothers, on purpose because of the fact that he was born of a concubine and not even an official wife, and don't know the circumstance, but there seems to be no love lost between Abimelech and his family at this point. And he basically proposes to the men of Shechem, well, you're in a unique situation here. You could have one of your own ruling over you, or you could have some stranger from somewhere nearby who wants to come in and exercise rule over you. Which, again, that's maybe a hypothetical situation, but nonetheless, it's the situation that Abimelech poses to the men of Shechem. How do the men of Shechem reason among themselves? What do they decide? They like the plan, right? They decide that that's going to be appropriate. That's exactly what it is that they want to do. And so the mother's relatives in verse 3 also spoke these words on behalf of all the hearing of the leaders of Shechem. They were inclined to follow Abimelech, where he said, he is our relative. So that's apparently good enough for them. So they go to the idol's treasury and they give him 70 pieces of silver. What does Abimelech do with this 70 pieces of silver? Worthless and reckless men, mercenaries. And really, the bar is not set very high. Of course, he's got some, we know what he's got in mind. He's going to eliminate the competition, which is a tried and true methodology of keeping rule in the heathen world. Assassination is that's the trade. That's how you cement your place in history, is by getting rid of all the competition. And I don't mean the other families that want your throne, want the throne instead of you, but the people inside of your own family that might, in fact, decide that they want to rule, or they'd be a better ruler than you are. And he undertakes this terrible deed with great efficiency. So in verse 5, he goes to his father's house at Orpah, and he killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. Now, it said that he had 70 sons. I don't know that, it said that in the previous chapter. I don't know that included Abimelech. And it certainly does. He didn't get all 70 of them, right? He missed one. There's one of the sons that did Jotham, who, for whatever reason, maybe he was getting his hair cut, I don't know, maybe he's out tending the sheep, the youngest, like David. David was out tending the sheep while Samuel was looking among the sons of Jesse for which one to anoint as king. Don't know the reasons, but he missed the slaughter. And it says, it just mentioned here, one stone. It's like he rounded them up and carted them, or rather, he and his men rounded them up, carted them in here, and slaughtered them in one place. This is not according to the law. This is not legal in the law by any stretch. The children of Israel were sometimes given instructions to utterly destroy other people, but those instructions were issued by God. And God, as they were the children of Israel, God's instrument. This wasn't a petty revenge thing. This wasn't some kind of a power grab. To slaughter 70 men and maybe their sons, to submit, to eliminate the competition to someone that might contend that you don't have the right to rule, and even how far that would extend. It does say that he ruled over them. That in where does it say? And in verse 22, it said that he ruled over Israel for 3 years. I don't know how extensive that was, because this is right in the center. This seems to be really a regional phenomenon. It seems that we find the beginning of the story in Shechem and the end of the story in Shechem. I mean, it seems fairly localized. But he may have that may be the statement that he made. He may have made that proclamation. He may have said that I'm in charge. And they didn't vote. They didn't get a consensus on it. They didn't talk to everybody in Israel and say, who's your leader? And they all checked the box of Abimelech. This is just an assertion, I think, that he made in particular as a result of this power grab that he made. Again, starting out very, very, very shakily. It says the men of Shechem, they're willing to be convinced. They're willing to take some of their idols' money and to give to Abimelech, I guess, to declare his rule over them, or to help him set up his kingdom, as it were. It's not completely clear here, but nonetheless, Abimelech, and you've maybe seen lists of judges, a compiled list of judges and such, and they list the name Abimelech, and yes, his name is in the book of Judges, but he's not called a judge. And as a matter of fact, he ends up on the opposite side of things. If you go down further into verse 23, after it says, verse 22, now Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. Then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. These people are the enemy of God. So what's this story doing here? Why is this part of the record? Obviously, Abimelech is as a descendant of Gideon, and Gideon's one of the heroes. Gideon's one of the very clearly a good guy. Right? But what's Abimelech here? Why are we studying this? We're studying it because it's in the book, obviously. But why do you speculate here? Why did the Holy Spirit leave this for us? Tim? I don't have a better answer to that one. That frankly, that this is part of the very frank history that the Spirit has recorded for us. It's not just giving us the good parts. We don't read about Paul Bunyan's shortcomings, or when Robin Hood stumbled, or the trough that he may have faced. But the history that we have preserved for us in the Scriptures is a warts and all history. It's frank. It's explaining to us just the depth. It started out in chapter 2. It talked about this spiral that basically that would be peaks and valleys. There would be times of good. The children of Israel would turn away from God. They would serve other gods. God would bring an oppressor. They would cry out to him. He would bring a deliverer. The deliverer would destroy them, and they would restore them to peace. But it also says that they would keep getting worse, that their dips would keep getting worse and worse. And this is the worst we've read about, has it? Have we read anything worse in the book of Judges up to this point? It escaped my notice. Sure, Shamgar made things hard on the Philistines. The Philistines may raise their hands and say, "Excuse us, we got slaughtered wholesale by the guy with an ox goad," and that's certainly, and that was more men than this. But in terms of the Israelites' behavior, this is bottoming out, and this is right here in the middle of the book. We still got another century plus to go. This is around 1130, 1120 BC. So it's going to be a little while. We still got another century to go before we get to the United Kingdom. And so Israel is still on the decline, despite this great victory we just read about. And it's just past the lifetime, despite it was a ripe old age for Gideon, just past the lifetime of one of the greatest deliverers. This wickedness that Moses warned them about is at their doorstep. And it's always been that way, but it's that way again, harkening back to chapter 1, chapter 2, because the children of Israel failed to follow God's instructions. They didn't drive this influence off of the land when they had the opportunity. And these influences where they didn't drive them off their land dug in or were already entrenched, and they festered and they continue to grow. So we got this, in essence, a Canaanite city that's still, my vote's Shechem, even though it's in the middle of Israel, is still a Canaanite city. And it's not just because the Canaanites built it. It's Canaanite in practice and thinking and in spirit. Eric? And that exactly, they had drifted. They're off plan, okay, off script, off plan, and now part of that is the Lord is no longer. They don't consider the Lord their king, and so they go in search of a replacement. And these worldly, wicked people choose a worldly, wicked leader, even though that he's a son of one of the greatest leaders. And it says at the end of chapter 8, really, the children of Israel didn't wait until after Gideon was gone to disrespect him and his family. They started while he was still alive. And that's my reading of it anyway. They didn't wait after the deliverance and after the defeat of the Midianites. He was very popular. But it goes on to say that they didn't respect him or his family, even though he lived to a ripe old age. Paul? Absolutely. Going back to the reading, then, and I chose that reading simply not only because it was a place where both of these mountains were read, and I went back and read the chapter, but it set the stage for how the book of Judges should have turned out. And part of that was, you talk to your family about me when you get up, and when you eat, and when you walk, and when you lie down. And you write my commandments, keep them in front of you, and you write them on the doors. You keep my commandments before you all the time, and your kids will turn out that they'll be headed in the right direction. Gideon didn't do that, apparently, or at least with 70 of them, it was too much for him too much to get to. And that I began to think, because of this big bond, this affection, the men of Shechem and Abimelech, that he grew up there, in essence, still a Canaanite city. And so we can. I guess laboring this because I'm kind of rationalizing as to how could they do this? How could they in such a short period of time, less than a lifetime, go from defeating a huge, marauding, oppressing army to this. This is how they live now in land. I'm not really sure. I guess they saw this as a golden opportunity to get in charge. After all, if we make him king and he's one of us and he's going to treat it, we'll be at the top of the list. We'll be all the rules will be slanted in our favor. And this is finally a chance to regain some of the ground that we've lost over the past centuries. I think that's a strong motivation here. I think another thing too that maybe began to give them pause a little bit is after Gideon's remaining heir gets up and makes his proclamation from Mount Gerizim. He climbs up at least cliff-wise, and we got this map on page 34 that shows that it's about 2,800 feet at the peak, and he's probably probably a midpoint up there, someplace. 2,800 feet would be a lot to yell and be heard, even at this kind of natural amphitheater. But someplace high up that direction, and makes this proclamation, and this basically a parable. The parable of these all the trees going out and looking for a plant to rule over them. And they try the olive tree, and they try the fig tree, and they try the grapevine, and they all what each of these plants, what basically do they answer in the parable? Chris? They say, why should I leave doing this good thing and wave at the trees? In essence, Israel already had a king. They didn't need another king. That if they had a king, it would be someone to wave in parades. Just the official, what's that, parade wave? That's in the parable. That's what they're saying. Why would I leave doing something good and useful and that I like to just be a figurehead? And so it kind of casts a lot of shade on Abimelech's ambitions right then and there. But then ultimately he says, he comes up to this proposition saying, if you've dealt with Gideon's family honorably and with the men of Shechem honorably, then you should enjoy the fruits of your labors. But if it's dishonorable, then you should enjoy those fruits too. Fire from the men, from Abimelech to the men of Shechem, and from the men of Shechem to Abimelech. And then he runs to safety. He basically realizes he's behind enemy lines. He's an endangered species, and so he flees to safety. Now, then it shifts gears and says Abimelech ruled the men of Shechem, at least in this region, for 3 years. And that relationship, it may have started out and with a lot of overlapping interests and a lot of energy and good things going their way, but I believe that it soured because these are basically wicked people. And wicked people don't have any honor either. They're going to pursue their own interests whenever they get the opportunity. And that this relationship soured, I'm not shocked at all. But it eventually soured to the point that there was organized opposition. And this organized opposition came from within the city. The people began to really kind of, as Abimelech's out, I guess raiding or looking like he's in charge. He's in fact, there's some people within the city began to trash talk him while he's away. And they take some more money out of the treasury, and they press the grapes and have a great feast. And the men of the city decide that they need to dispatch Abimelech. The plots, as they began plotting against each other, you see the back and forth go between these two. As Gael, the son of Ebed, comes with his relatives, and he came from out of town into Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their trust in him. He's something of a politician and tells them what they want to hear, and they decide to put their support behind him. And his lieutenant, who is Zebul, the ruler of the city, the one that he left, I guess his steward, the one that he left in charge as a regent, or someone that's going to keep him informed and to keep things running the way that Abimelech likes, begins to play both sides of the coin. He kind of stokes up Gael some more, and gets emotions running high, and gets him to trash talk even more, makes some claims, and then he's feeding information to Abimelech at the same time. And so there's the military prowess, and again, the problem with an ambitious, wicked, military-minded man and making that person an enemy is that you now have a formidable foe. And the men of Shechem begin to realize that, and Gael in particular, as he's betrayed. And again, this is no surprise that among these wicked men that they turn on each other, is it? And this is not, I don't think, is preserved for us here as typical behavior in the land of Israel at the time. I don't think that's the case. I think that this is something. This was a power grab made by an ambitious and wicked man, and he used other wicked men to be able to get what he wanted. But then when that relationship soured, it soured big time, and they end up literally consuming each other. This kind of complicated plan of ambush and different companies and such. The men of the city are drawn out and attacked, and at one point, then a portion of them will flee back into the city and draw up the gates. And Abimelech isn't able to overcome and his forces aren't able to overcome the gates, but they don't disappear. They seem to have disappeared. They go back in and they hide, and under instructions, give the information that Zebul is giving them, and they hide. And then in the morning, when they open the gates and the people go back, the people of the city go back out into the field, and Gael says, I think I see some folks approaching. And Zebul says, no, that's just your shadows. No paying any attention. That's just the way the sun is playing on the mountains. That's not people at all. Nothing to worry about. And then he says, are you sure that really looks like a mustering group, like an approaching band of soldiers? No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. And so he misleads him up to the point of no return. And then Abimelech gets the advantage of closing off the route to escape, and his men slaughter a healthy number of the inhabitants of Shechem. Again, there's no surprises here. If you're surprised, we introduced this portion beginning in verse 22, 23, and that God has set himself against Abimelech. I'm a little surprised that Abimelech is prospering here. It seemed like, that God would be working things, since he set himself against Abimelech, that he would be working to his downfall. But in fact, he's using Abimelech to punish the men of Shechem, because they're wicked, unworthy, heathen people. And God's also, for verse 23, set against them. And so he's using Abimelech to decimate them. Abimelech chases them, and eventually the leaders of the city hold up in the tower that's where the treasury is, and where they worship their false gods, and a siege gets underway. What does Abimelech do here? What's his strategy to end the siege? Burn them with fire. Tried and true. I mean, after all, that's how they dealt with these kind of situations. And so you've got the folks that are holed up inside the tower, and so he goes out of the city with an axe and draws the people with him and encourages them to. He cuts down a limb and drags it to the city, and encourages his men to do likewise. So he brings the firewood in, stacks it up around the tower, and lights it, and kills all the people that are inside. Now, what about that? That's at least part of the problem. Part of the problem that God wanted to solve, he used Abimelech's wickedness and ambition and grudge holding, and just the fact that he's a wicked person, to be able to balance the scales, or to render payment from the men of Shechem. Tim? I think that's a good observation. I think God literally let nature take its course when Abimelech set himself against God and committed this atrocity. That there wasn't a lot of room probably for him to come around and change his mind. I don't think God was being patient that he would be long suffering and that he might turn back to God. He maybe never had been on God's side in the first place. But the men of Shechem, I'm thinking with that harsh a beginning, that wicked, terrible beginning, that there were a lot of bad times in Shechem during this time, and that the continuing feelings began to mount. That God didn't have to let this thing. I don't think they got a spirit, that He sent the spirit and it affected them overnight. I think it built up over time just by letting nature take its course. And as these two opposing forces, as they began to have less and less in common, the friction began to grow. And so God didn't have to do a lot of convincing. Sending Gael was easy for Gael to convince. He just had to come in and trash talk Abimelech a little bit. You have a party and get everybody on your side, get everything, get all the sentiment going your way, and then you're in a position to be able to take over and lead. And that's Zebul even goaded Gael into saying that. And so that's just letting wicked men letting things go their way and not intervening. Ultimately, though, the men of Shechem paid this big price. Now, again, if you look at the map on page 30, you find that it shifts. Then the action's going to shift up to Thebez, which is a city to the north of Shechem. And so Shechem, having destroyed Shechem, now Abimelech needs another place to live, right? I mean, he's laid waste to the city, and he's burned the tower, and he slaughtered a lot of occupants. There's the old phrase, you can't go home again. You can't go home again, especially when you've raised it and sowed salt into the earth. It's not fit to live in now. And at Abimelech's hands. So God didn't have to rain down fire and brimstone from heaven long to destroy them like Sodom and Gomorrah. Abimelech did a fine job of destroying them. And so he's exacted his revenge about the men of Shechem. And so he picks out, I guess he casts his gaze about and says, well, there's a city. I can go and occupy that. I'll make that my new headquarters. And of course, the folks in the city weren't receptive. And they resisted, and a battle ensues. And they also had a tower that they fled to hold up in. And as Abimelech's trying to assail the tower, apparently this one doesn't have a ready source of firewood nearby. But it's he and his men are attempting to assail the tower, a woman casts a millstone down. I think that says it through an upper millstone, and I guess it's a series of stones that rub together, and this one was small enough to handle. And she could drag it to the edge and heave it over the side, and it cracks Abimelech's skull. He apparently has enough wits about him to realize what happened. Maybe he actually, in my own mind, I see him looking up and actually seeing this woman's face as she drops it over, because he knows that the woman is at the end of his demise, and he doesn't want to go out that way. He doesn't want his legacy to be that a woman killed him, and so he asks his armor bearer to dispatch him so that it can't be said that a woman killed Abimelech. And his armor bearer obliges. But in fact, he's got a wound here that he's not expected to recover from. So in essence, he's spinning the story. He's rewriting, trying to revise history. But in fact, he's dispatched by this certain woman. Verse 53. It's interesting here in verse 55, when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, each departed to his home. Apparently, some of the folks of Israel had come up in support of Abimelech. But their support for him and their assertion of rule, their assertion to be in charge, evaporated when the primary mover is removed from the picture. It talks about God in verse 23, God set himself against these parties. Thus, in verse 56, God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God returned all the wickedness to the men of Shechem and their heads, and the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. I do like the fact that the story turns out good, although the human cost is terrible. But in fact, you see that God has let nature take its course and just took advantage of the natural ambitions of these wicked men to dispatch each other. He's able to work within history of that without doing any miracles or sending a judge to deliver them. You notice that? The only good guy in this story is the surviving son of Gideon, in that he's the one that issues this prophetic parable and has the sensibilities about who's really in charge and what the nature of this particular rule is all about wicked ambition. He calls all that out and talks, even though he uses a parable, talks pretty plainly and addresses it. He's a good guy, but he's not the judge. He's not the deliverer. He makes the proclamation and then flees to safety. There's no good guys in this story. And that's kind of hard for us. But it's as if I tell you, we talk about some other part of human history and identify that there are no good guys. That's not a big shock. Particularly people that are inherently wicked, that want each other's land and war back and forth, or can't get along and have a long history of warring with each other and commit atrocities whenever they get the opportunity. We don't like that. That's not good news. We enjoy reading about that, but that's not outside of the bounds of the human condition without God. And that's what we see here. We see what becomes of God's people, the descendants of Abraham, unchecked. And they're not magically good. There's not an Abraham gene that just makes them righteous people. They're just people. And without God, they meet the same kind of ends that just people meet as well. They're not prevented from pursuing wickedness. They're not prevented from facing the consequences of their wicked deeds. And so this is at least a cautionary tale to us. But it is also valuable for us to, as we read about, the stage was set in Judges chapter 2 about just this downward cycle, this downward spiral. We're now pushing the envelope every time. That the children of Israel are in fact falling further and not rising as high as they did previously. They're losing ground. They're losing territory. They're losing influence. They're losing human lives. They're losing their inheritance. They are in fact on decline. And this story, this narrative, this piece of evidence is offered to make the case. And in fact, what happens to Israel is exactly what God announced to them before they even got to the land would happen if they behaved this way. I beat that pretty hard. Let's talk about these other two judges that we don't know very much about. First of all, we have Tola. Where is Tola from? What tribe? Issachar. And we've heard of Issachar. That's there in the middle there. We've heard of them before. They're in fact what's notable about Tola? We got more of a lineage here. We got the son of Pua, the son of Dodo, a man of Issachar, and he lived in Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim, and 23 years, and where he's buried. I'd like to know more about this guy. What did he do as a judge? What qualified him? Why did God set him to judge the people? I'd like to know. We'll have to ask him one day if we get the opportunity. Likewise with Jair. Jair is a Gileadite. Gilead is the name of the region in the Transjordan. That whole region, really, the half a tribe in Manasseh was a little north of that, but Gad and Reuben settled in Gilead. There is a Mount Gilead there. Historically, it was bordered by the Jordan, but it's the Mount Gilead's like southwest or southeast of the Sea of Galilee. But that whole region, that Transjordan region, that those 2.5 tribes decided that they wanted to settle in, that's Gilead, and that's where Jair was from. And we know that he had 30 sons that rode on 30 donkeys. Why that's important, I'm not quite sure. And then they had 30 cities, all in the land of Gilead, but it's mentioned here that he judged Israel. And another 22 years apiece. One thing that the author does make is that because there is no description of anybody to be conquered, it may have just been that in the vacuum that ensued after Gideon, that God recognized the need of his people to have guidance. And he provided these judges who didn't deliver Israel through military conquest, but delivered by being reliable leaders in the sight of God. Next lesson next week.